Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu's Ranker, and on this episode we are going to be discussing the discography of the English post-punk revival band White Lies. Formed in Ealing, London in 2007, the band consists of Harry McVie on vocals and guitar, Chris Cave on bass and Jack Lawrence Brown on drums. The band were initially very popular and surfed into the spotlight on a wave of hype that was stirred up by music magazines such as The NME. This led the band's debut LP, To Lose My Life, to hit number 1 on the UK album chart. Predictably, as soon as the band's honeymoon period was over, the music press then turned on White Lies and started to deride them fairly savagely, leading the band to notably fall out of fashion. And as for my own fandom, yeah, I like White Lies, at least from what I've heard, which certainly isn't everything. In fact, coming into this I had only heard the first 3 of the band's 6 studio albums. But I'm here now to finally go back and complete the set. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are the studio albums of White Lies, ranked from worst to best. So, we're going to be kicking off this list with As I Try Not to Fall Apart from 2022, which was the band's 6th LP and most recent to date. And here we sadly find the band hitting the proverbial brick wall. White Lies sound like they've just run out of steam on this release. There aren't really any new ideas being presented and the band are just retreading the same old familiar ground and saying the same old familiar things. Perhaps that wouldn't be so bad if the band had maintained their usual quality of songwriting, but alas, as I said, they're just out of steam here. The songs and the hooks are simply not up to snuff this time around. The entire record kinda sounds like it's comprised of discarded B-side material. This lack of quality is compounded by an irksome production style that is way too jumbled and overcooked. White Lies seem to have their heart set on replicating the sound of early 90s pop here, which I don't think any rock band should be attempting. Some music styles died out for a very good reason, and Perfume Me Direct, like the album's title track As I Try Not to Fall Apart, is a good example as to why. As for highlights, well, there aren't really any, which is a big part of why this LP is languishing at the bottom. All the other White Lies records have at least a couple of straight up bangers on them, but sadly not here. Still, sifting through the detritus, I will say that the opening Am I Really Going to Die has some interesting mortality laced lyrics poking through its overcluttered composition. Blue Drift has a cool synth break that snatches you out of your comatose boredom for a few moments, while Closer, There Is No Cure For It, is a minor win due to its simple catchy sparseness. But yeah, it really is a case of slim pickings on this most recent LP. The majority of the record merely comes off as an uninspired slog. I really hope the band can bounce back from this and head towards a more interesting direction in the future. 2 stars. Next up we have Friends from 2016, which was the band's 4th LP. And here we find White Lies doubling down on the more direct pop cuts from their previous album Big TV. To that end, the darker, more post-punk orientated material is almost completely sidelined on this record, which makes it the most overtly poppy release in the band's discography. The spacier or more ethereal elements that defined Big TV have also been shown the door too, replaced by a sparkly set of mid-80s style synthpop and bright sounding jangle tunes, which as the general concept I'm not against. I think the band already said what they needed to say in the area of gothic post-punk on their first 2 records, so a detour into synthpop and jangle should be a welcome one. Unfortunately, the band just haven't completely stuck the landing here. In fact, they've mildly wiped out, skinned a knee, twisted an ankle and bruised a finger. Nothing life-threatening, but things could definitely be better. And that's because the consistency of quality on this LP is a bit all over the place. When this album is good and the songs click, yeah, it's pretty good, but when it misfires, it can be quite dull. So let's get the inevitable lashings out of the way first. Hold Back Your Love is a slick ballad that feels a bit too formulaic and also overcooked in the production department. It calls forward to the weaker material that would blight their most recent record. Don't Want to Feel It All has a bit too many late period Coldplay stylings prowling around and nibbling on its nutsacks. Although I will say that I do prefer the lyrics of Harry McVie over Chris Martin. while the back-to-back closing trilogy of Come On, Right Place and Don't Fall don't do enough to crawl out of the box marked obvious filler, and end the record with a tepid whimper rather than the preferred bang. So far so bad, but there is some good material that just about saves this LP from the scrap pile. The duo of opening singles, Take It Out On Me and Morning in LA, kick off the album with an effusive flourish. Take It Out On Me with its driving bassline and Morning in LA with its upbeat sounding catchiness. Is My Love Enough pulls you straight back to the mid-80s with its insanely catchy balladry scratching that specific cheesy synthpop itch. Summer Didn't Change a Thing has a satisfying crunchy liftoff in the chorus that elevates the amusingly dour lyrics, while Swing hits one for the team by way of its insanely hooky chorus and refrain, which really dig their claws in. So yeah, Friends is ultimately a bit of a mixed bag, but the high spots are still maybe just enough to make me return on occasion. And the weak tracks are at least not awful, they're just ignorable fluff. Still, doomed to be damned by faint praise and all that jazz, 3 stars.
Disconnected, and I'm left hanging on, hanging on. Is it morning in LA? Is it morning in LA? Is it morning in LA? 'Cause I'm left hanging on.
Next up we have Ritual from 2010, which was the band's second LP and follow-up to their #1 smash hit debut. I only mentioned that rather obvious distinction to remind you that the pressure was really on for White Lies at this point in their career. There was expectation from the fans and also the audible sound of the critics sharpening their knives and salivating at the prospect of an easy kill. And White Lies offered themselves up to the butcher gladly, delivering an imperfect set of backwards-looking post-punk tunes that were caught in an odd halfway house, not quite catchy enough for fans who wanted the band to be the next Killers, and not quite dark or cool enough for those who wanted them to be the next Interpol. And the critics had at it with their knives, carving the band and their potential legacy to pieces with brutal efficiency. I think it's fair to say that White Lies never truly recovered from the savaging that this album took, at least not in the eyes of the mainstream. As for me personally, I have a weird relationship with this record. When it was released, I was a bit disappointed, yet also kind of impressed by the way that the band were at least trying to turn in a more genuinely dark direction. So, in an odd moment of personal determination, I just decided to love this record, even though frankly I didn't. And so I just ended up spinning it and spinning it and spinning it, and I forced myself to like it, becoming familiar with every nook and cranny. Why did I do this? Frankly, I couldn't tell you. Maybe I was just in a bad place at the time and this record spoke to me a little. Who knows, but melodrama aside, and it really worked because I really do love this album, warts and all. But I also recognise the original issues that I had with the record, so despite my personal pain in doing so, I'm going to break out the trowel and dig those long buried faults back up. So Rituals is a kind of an album of two halves for me. The first half is pretty wobbly, while the second half is pretty awesome. The shaky first side kicks off with a trilogy of stadium anthems in Is Love, Strangers and Bigger Than Us. Individually, each of those tracks is decent, especially Strangers with its desperate sounding chorus. I actually really like that one a lot. But the structure and the sound texture of the songs are far too similar, and they end up just blending together in a kind of stodgy blur. It's a really good example of bad sequencing in my opinion. This fault extends to the next two tracks. Peace and Quiet and Streetlights are semi-decent / slightly mediocre gothic post-punk tunes, but they sound exactly the same as each other, which diminishes both. So as I said, the first side is a bit wobbly, even though there's nothing egregious. Flip the record over though, and we're on much more solid ground. Holy Ghost is a great single with its thumping Depeche Mode vibes and pristine dancey grooves. Turn the Bells is arguably the band's best full-bore gothic rock moment, its miserably sparse composition recalling The Cure during their Faith era. The lyrics also rock. The Marketplace has nothing to sell. Left alone, its awnings shiver. Wind whistles through the wood. Fish teeth snapping in a river. Peaks puncture the sky like a child's icy toes. Bad Love is a late album banger. I love the explosion in the chorus as McVie howls, "If I'm guilty of anything, it's loving you too much. Honey, sometimes love means getting a little rough. This is not bad love," which sounds like the excuse of every wife beater ever. But who can complain when it's just this damn catchy? Now back to the kitchen, woman. Please don't tell my wife about that joke. She'll kick my fucking ass, like for reals. While Closer, Come Down is potentially my favourite White Lies track ever. It's melancholy lyrics and icy soundscape drilling into the very core of what I like about dark, depressing sounding music. Mwah! Chef's kiss, it's wonderful, in a suicidally sad kind of way. So yeah, Rituals is difficult for me to balance. Subjectively, I love it. Objectively, it has some serious problems. And yeah, my heart breaks for having to lowball this record, but it is what it is. 3.5 stars.
She's the strangest of all the strangest now. Maybe someday I could walk like you. Maybe but I'm not looking for holy ghosts. Maybe someday I could scream like you. But I'm not looking for holy ghosts.
Next up, we have To Lose My Life from 2009, which was the band's debut LP. And as I already mentioned in the intro, this was a huge success for White Lies, arriving on a tsunami of hype and crashing into the #1 spot on the UK albums chart. And it's easy to see why people would be so excited, as White Lies ably offered a catchy mashup of some of the most popular bands around at the time. I mean, the musical math is pretty easy for this debut LP. You take 1 part Coldplay, 1 part Killers and 1 part Editors, then pepper the mix with 80s new wave and post-punk. A little Duran Duran here, a little Joy Division and The Cure over there, and Bob's Your Uncle, To Lose My Life by White Lies is ready to go. But despite its promising potential and commercial success, the album is still not quite perfect. When the record is good, it's fantastic, but when it's off peak, it is fairly mediocre. The main issue here stems from the slower, dirtier material, specifically tracks like 50 on Our Foreheads, EST and Nothing to Give. They feel embryonic and undercooked, offering nothing interesting either sonically or lyrically. They feel like tunes you just have to bear to get to the good stuff. I personally think that they're among the weakest cuts on any White Lies record, save for maybe the most recent album, that one's just poor by default. Thankfully the band would get better at those types of miserable low cuts on the next few releases, but here they just kinda suck. Mercifully, when this album does hit, it hits hard and there are some really strong high spots to savour. Open to Death is great with its impressively strident and rocking power chords. Title track To Lose My Life is the quintessential White Lies single with its gleaming indie disco bang and shimmy. Unfinished Business powers through a super catchy ode to Duran Duran, even going as far as to cheekily throw in the lyric, I came through the cold wind, the rain and the snow, to find you awake by your windowsill, a sight for sore eyes and a view to kill. From the Stars is absolutely rad with its galloping strings, huge sing-along chorus, and excellent lyrics about a guy that suffers a crippling existential crisis after attending a friend's funeral. Mwah! Chef's kiss for that track, it's a banger. Well Closer, The Price of Love is a lot of theatrical fun with its kidnap lyrics and dramatic vocal performance from Harry McVie. So yeah, throw in the catchy Stuttercon swagger of Farewell to the Fairground and the slick gothic ballad A Place to Hide, and you have an LP that certainly wobbles from time to time but ultimately gets saved by its towering peaks. 4 stars.
Farewell to the playground. These rides aren't working anymore. Goodbye to this bed town until the ice begins to thaw.
Next up we have Big TV from 2013, which was the band's third LP. And here we find White Lies putting much more effort into atmospheric texturing than at any other point in their career, coating the tunes in a reverb-heavy spacey lacquer and also indulging in short instrumental interludes that bolster the album's cohesion. And it works like a charm, bringing the tracks together into a star-strewn celestial-sounding package that holds together as a single piece better than any other record by the band. And this atmospheric superiority is also matched by its consistency of quality, as Big TV doesn't really have any weak tracks on it. Opening title track Big TV absolutely slaps. Its grandiose balladry sent into God mode via its unforgettable mournful guitar riff and Harry McVie's excellent lyrical turn of phrase. Alone. I feel alone when I'm living in a building like a tooth in heaven's throat. True, it's a beautiful view, but you know they're gonna set it on fire when they feel like something new. Mwah! Chef's kiss, McVie just does not get enough flowers for his best moments of wordsmithing. There Goes Our Love Again is one of the band's best ever jangle pop moments, with its insanely catchy chorus and Smithian bounce. First Time Caller ropes in those classic A Rush of Blood to the Head Coldplay vibes and uses them to nail a great soaring ballad. The likes of Mother Tongue, Getting Even and Be Your Man have a delightfully glammy guitar style and an effortless catchiness that makes them instantly appealing and snappy rockers. They may be white lies on autopilot, but they're white lies on autopilot in the most satisfying kind of way. While Change is a gorgeous slow burn dirge that ably shows off the progression of the band in that area since their debut, it's just a really beautiful tune. Add into that Tricky to Love and Heavenweight, which utilise the album's celestial atmospherics to great effect, the former with its spacey rock and the latter with its nebulously spacey balladry, and the charging Britpop callback of Closer Goldmine, and you have an all-round excellent LP. So yeah, Big TV won't win any awards for originality, but what it does very well and doesn't skimp on the quality tunes either. Plus the record's spacey vibes just give it that little extra zing. 4 stars. So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the White Lies gold medal is going to go to 5 from 2019, which, unsurprisingly, is the band's 5th LP. What is perhaps a little surprising though is the quality of this album, especially considering its place within the band's discography, sandwiched between 2 vastly inferior records at the tail end of the band's career. But 5 is the moment where White Lies finally hit perfection in my opinion. Here the band are aiming a little higher with their songwriting. The songs are more expansive and ambitious, and the variety is a little wider. The compositions are also a touch more unpredictable. The songs on the band's previous albums pretty much went exactly where you thought they might, adhering to typical genre structures, but on 5 they throw up the odd surprise here and there, deviating away from the usual rigid formula. And then there's the consistency, which is bang on point. There are 9 songs on this LP and every one of them slaps. Even the weakest cut on the record, Never Alone, still has a jangly Echo and the Bunnymen vibe to it that smashes those 1980s revival buttons very nicely indeed. High spots on an album with zero downtime includes the opening Time to Give, which is rad. Its delicate balladry sent unexpectedly stratospheric by a twisting set of bombastic synth chords that would make even peak Ultravox swoon with envy. The track totally earns its 7-minute plus runtime. Finish line sees Harry McVie giving his falsetto a rare dust-off, as well as forking over a great obfuscating composition and some elevated lyrics to boot. Erase him, his memory, a tortured decline was never your style. Kick Me is awesome with its Morrissey-esque vocal gulps, memorable jazz piano finale and super catchy chorus blasting you off to an island of post-punk perfection. Tokyo meanwhile was a blast of pure gelalu gatita ice cream on your titties. Tokyo meanwhile was a blast of pure thoroughbred radio pop that bounces along with daft catchy abandon. I would dismay of its obvious late period Coldplay-isms, but I actually really like the track's cavorting catchiness. It's a lot of fun. Joe has an excellent raucous thump, and its epic closing breakdown ably demonstrates the band's more ambitious style of songwriting on this particular release. While Denial bangs with its gigantic pickup in the chorus and steady stadium rock anthemics, which even include a rare squealing guitar break. So yeah, round things out with the catchy late album single Believe It and the metal tinged closer Firing Wings, and you have the band's most consistent, well balanced, ambitious and well simply put best album to date, 4.5 stars. So now my deep dive is finished, the question remains, did I gain more appreciation for the artist? And the answer this time is yes, but it wasn't a total slam dunk. The first 2 albums were about as good as I remembered. The third one, Big TV, actually gained a lot in my affections this time around, and 5 pretty much blew me away, but the other late period albums, I can take them or leave them. And that's my list, but of course I know that won't be your list, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank these records. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Feel free to check out this episode's Spotify playlist, link in the description below. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.